How Confidence Makes You Expensive. Stop Chasing Approval and Start Attracting Respect, published by the Growth Mind Audiobook. Introduction. Confidence is one of the most misunderstood qualities in modern life. We often mistake it for charisma, status, intelligence, or the ability to dominate a room. We admire people who appear fearless and assume they were simply born different. But if you look closely, you'll notice something surprising. The people who earn lasting respect are rarely the ones trying hardest to impress anyone. They are the ones who know who they are, what they stand for, and what they refuse to compromise. Most of us, however, are taught a different lesson from an early age. We learn to seek approval before expressing our opinions. We measure our worth through grades, promotions, compliments, followers, and recognition. Little by little, we begin to believe that our value exists somewhere outside ourselves, waiting for other people to confirm it. That belief comes with a hidden cost. When your confidence depends on external approval, every criticism feels personal. Every rejection feels like proof that you are not enough. You hesitate before making decisions, overthink simple conversations, and spend more energy managing other people's opinions than building your own character. Over time, you stop asking what kind of person you want to become and start asking what version of yourself others are most likely to accept. This audiobook begins with a different assumption. Confidence is not something you receive. It is something you build. It grows every time your actions reflect your values, every time you keep a promise to yourself, and every time you choose honesty over acceptance, discipline over comfort, and purpose over popularity. It is not created by applause. It is created through consistency. Over the next 14 chapters, we will explore confidence from the inside out, not as a performance, but as a way of thinking. Not as a personality trait, but as a daily practice. Together, we will examine the habits that quietly weaken self-respect, the beliefs that keep people dependent on validation, and the decisions that allow genuine confidence to take root. The goal is not to become someone who needs to prove their worth. The goal is to become someone whose sense of worth no longer depends on proving anything at all. Because the moment you stop negotiating your value with the world, something remarkable happens. Your decisions become clearer, your relationships become healthier, your words carry greater weight, your presence becomes calmer. Respect is no longer something you pursue, it becomes a natural response to the way you live. That is the journey this audiobook invites you to begin, not the pursuit of confidence as an image, but the construction of confidence as character. And once character becomes your foundation, respect is no longer something you chase, it is something that quietly follows. Chapter 1. Break free from the approval trap. Think about the last important decision you made. Before you acted, whose voice did you hear first? Was it your own, or was it the imagined opinions of other people? Perhaps you wondered whether your family would approve, whether your colleagues would agree, or whether strangers might judge you if things went wrong. Most people believe they are making independent choices, yet much of their behavior is quietly shaped by an audience that exists only in their minds. The desire for approval is deeply human. Long before cities, technology, and modern careers, survival depended on belonging to a group. Acceptance meant protection, cooperation, and shared resources. Rejection often meant isolation and danger. Our brains still carry traces of that ancient wiring, encouraging us to seek acceptance and avoid conflict whenever possible. The problem is that the modern world rewards a different kind of strength. While belonging remains important, the people who create, lead, innovate, and inspire are rarely those who constantly adjust themselves to satisfy everyone else. They earn respect because they have learned to distinguish between listening to others and living for their opinions. Approval becomes a trap when it stops being a pleasant bonus and starts becoming a personal necessity. At first, the change is almost invisible. You soften your opinions to avoid disagreement. You apologize for things that require no apology. You say yes when your instincts are asking you to say no. You hide your ambitions because they might sound unrealistic. You avoid difficult conversations because someone could be disappointed. None of these choices seem significant on its own, but together they begin shaping a life that reflects other people's expectations more than your own convictions. Every time this happens, something subtle changes inside you. Your confidence no longer comes from knowing who you are. Instead, it depends on how positively other people respond. This creates a fragile foundation because opinions are unpredictable. Praise can become criticism overnight. Admiration can disappear as quickly as it arrives. If your identity depends on those shifting reactions, your sense of worth will always feel uncertain. Many people assume confidence is built by receiving more encouragement, more compliments, or more recognition. In reality, confidence grows when you become less dependent on those things. The strongest self-belief is not created by constant reassurance. It is created when you learn that your principles remain steady even when approval is absent. Imagine carrying a compass while walking through a dense forest. A compass does not eliminate obstacles, but it prevents you from becoming lost. Your values serve the same purpose. When your decisions are guided by clear principles instead of changing opinions, uncertainty becomes easier to navigate. You may still face criticism, but criticism no longer decides your direction. This does not mean ignoring feedback or refusing to learn from others. Wisdom requires humility. Constructive advice can reveal blind spots, improve judgment, and accelerate growth. The difference lies in who has the final vote. Listening is healthy. Surrendering your identity is not. Mature confidence welcomes perspective without handing over responsibility for every decision. One reason approval is so difficult to let go of is that it often disguises itself as kindness. People-pleasing can appear generous, cooperative, or considerate. Sometimes it truly is. But there is an important distinction between kindness and self-abandonment. Kindness is a choice made from strength. People-pleasing is often a strategy driven by fear. One is motivated by compassion, the other is motivated by anxiety. Outwardly, they may look similar, but inwardly they come from entirely different places. Pay close attention to the moments when you automatically seek permission before trusting yourself. Notice how often you explain decisions that require no explanation. Observe how frequently you hesitate because you are imagining criticism that has not even occurred. These patterns are rarely dramatic, yet they quietly shape the course of a lifetime. Every unnecessary apology, every postponed decision, and every compromised belief teaches your mind that other people's comfort matters more than your own integrity. Breaking free from this cycle does not require becoming rebellious or indifferent. It begins with a quieter and more profound change. You stop treating approval as evidence of your worth. Instead, you start treating character as the standard by which you measure yourself. Did you act honestly? Did you remain faithful to your values? Did you make the best decision with the knowledge you had? These questions build a stronger identity than any compliment ever could. The journey toward genuine confidence begins the moment you reclaim ownership of your inner compass. You realize that respect cannot be manufactured through constant agreement, nor can self-worth be borrowed from applause. Lasting confidence is built each time you choose principle over popularity, conviction over comfort, and authenticity over acceptance. That choice may not win universal approval, but it will earn something far more valuable: the quiet certainty that your life is finally being directed by the person best qualified to lead it, you. Chapter 2. Rebuild your inner value. Once you begin stepping away from the need for approval, a deeper question naturally emerges. If your worth is no longer determined by other people's opinions, then what is it built upon? This question marks the beginning of genuine confidence. It shifts your attention from managing appearances to strengthening your foundation. Many people spend years trying to increase their value without ever examining how they define it. They chase promotions, collect qualifications, improve their appearance, and seek recognition, believing that each accomplishment will finally make them feel complete. Yet the feeling rarely lasts. A new achievement brings satisfaction for a moment, only to be replaced by another goal, another comparison, and another reason to believe they are still not enough. The problem is not ambition. Growth is healthy, and striving for excellence gives life purpose. The problem begins when accomplishments become the only evidence you allow yourself to believe. If every success is treated as proof that you matter, then every failure will feel like proof that you do not. Your confidence becomes tied to circumstances that are constantly changing. Real inner value is built differently. It is not a reward you receive after reaching a certain level of success. It is the starting point from which meaningful success becomes possible. When you understand this distinction, your relationship with achievement changes. You no longer work to prove your worth. You work because your values call you to improve, contribute, and grow. Consider the difference between a tree and its fruit. People admire the fruit because it is visible, but the fruit exists only because the roots beneath the ground remain healthy. If the roots weaken, the fruit eventually disappears. Confidence works the same way. Skills, accomplishments, and recognition are the visible results. Your principles, habits, and self-respect are the roots that sustain them. Focusing only on the visible outcomes while neglecting the foundation creates success that feels impressive from the outside but fragile within. This is why comparison is so destructive. It encourages you to judge your invisible roots against someone else's visible fruit. You see their achievements but not their struggles, their discipline, or the years of uncertainty they endured. Comparison creates distorted conclusions because it measures different parts of different stories. Instead of asking whether you are ahead of someone else, ask whether you are becoming stronger than the person you were yesterday. That question redirects your attention toward progress instead of competition. Confidence grows when improvement becomes personal rather than performative. Rebuilding inner value also requires changing the way you speak to yourself. Every person carries an ongoing internal conversation whether they notice it or not. Those silent words shape expectations, influence decisions, and quietly define identity. If your inner voice constantly reminds you of mistakes, exaggerates weaknesses, or predicts failure, it becomes difficult to act with confidence regardless of your abilities. This does not mean replacing honesty with blind optimism. Authentic confidence is not built on pretending every weakness is a strength. It is built on speaking to yourself with the same fairness and perspective you would offer someone you genuinely respect. A mistake becomes information, not an identity. A setback becomes a lesson, not a life sentence. Growth becomes possible because you stop treating imperfections as permanent definitions of who you are. Another essential step is learning to separate value from performance. Imagine two musicians. One believes every performance determines whether they deserve respect. The other believes every performance is simply another opportunity to refine a skill they have committed to mastering. Both may experience success and failure, but only one remains emotionally stable regardless of the outcome. The difference lies not in talent, but in identity. People with strong inner value understand that they are responsible for their effort, their preparation, and their integrity, not for controlling every result. This mindset creates resilience because setbacks no longer threaten the foundation of who they are. They adjust, learn, and continue moving forward instead of questioning their entire worth. As your inner value grows, your behavior begins to change in subtle yet powerful ways. You stop seeking constant reassurance before making decisions. You become more comfortable expressing honest opinions. You no longer feel compelled to explain every choice or earn everyone's agreement. Your confidence becomes quieter, steadier, and less dependent on immediate outcomes because it is anchored to something that cannot be taken away by criticism or failure. This is the true purpose of rebuilding your inner value. It is not to convince yourself that you are better than anyone else. It is to develop a foundation that remains steady, whether life brings applause or silence, victory or disappointment. When your worth is rooted in character instead of comparison, you stop living as a reflection of other people's expectations. You begin living according to principles you have deliberately chosen. From that moment forward, confidence is no longer something you search for in the outside world. It becomes something you carry within, quietly shaping every decision you make and every future you create. Chapter 3. Rewrite the story you tell yourself. Every person lives with two versions of reality. The first is the world that exists around them. The second is the story they continuously tell themselves about that world. Surprisingly, it is often the second one that shapes the course of a life. Two people can experience the same setback and walk away with entirely different futures. One sees failure as evidence that they are incapable. The other sees it as proof that they have discovered another way that does not work. The event is identical. The meaning is not. Confidence is influenced far less by what happens to you than by the interpretation you attach to what happens. This is where the quiet voice inside your mind becomes so important. It is always present, even when you are unaware of it. It comments on your decisions, predicts outcomes, explains disappointments, and assigns meaning to success. Over months and years, these invisible conversations become the blueprint from which your actions are built. The danger is that most people never consciously write this blueprint. They inherit it. A child who is repeatedly told to stay quiet may grow into an adult who believes their opinions have little value. Someone who is praised only for achievement may eventually believe they deserve respect only when they are productive. A person who experiences repeated rejection may begin expecting rejection even in situations where acceptance is far more likely. Over time, isolated experiences harden into permanent beliefs, and those beliefs quietly become identity. The mind has an unusual habit. It searches for evidence that confirms what it already believes. If you secretly think you are inadequate, you will notice every mistake while overlooking countless moments of competence. If you believe people are constantly judging you, every neutral expression will appear critical. The story becomes a filter through which reality is interpreted, making it increasingly difficult to separate facts from assumptions. This is why confidence cannot be built simply by changing external circumstances. A promotion cannot permanently silence a voice that insists you are an imposter. Recognition cannot satisfy a mind determined to focus on its flaws. Even success becomes uncomfortable when it conflicts with the story you have accepted about yourself. Rewriting that story begins with awareness rather than affirmation. Instead of asking whether every negative thought is true, ask where it came from. Is it based on present reality, or is it an echo of an old experience that no longer deserves authority? Many beliefs survive not because they are accurate, but because they have never been questioned. Imagine carrying an old map while traveling through a city that has completely changed. Roads have been rebuilt, neighborhoods have expanded, and landmarks have disappeared, yet you continue following outdated directions. Eventually, frustration grows, not because the destination is impossible to reach, but because the map no longer reflects reality. Limiting beliefs work in much the same way. They may have formed during a different season of life, but continuing to navigate with them prevents you from seeing new possibilities. Replacing those beliefs does not require pretending every challenge is easy. Authentic confidence is grounded in evidence, not fantasy. Instead of telling yourself, "I never fail," remind yourself, "I have learned before and I can learn again." Instead of saying, "Everyone must like me," choose the more empowering truth, "I can remain true to my values even when others disagree." These statements are believable because they are rooted in experience rather than wishful thinking. Pay attention to the language you use when describing yourself. Words such as always, never, can't, and "I'm just not the kind of person who" often reveal conclusions that have been accepted without examination. Identity becomes remarkably flexible when you replace permanent labels with temporary descriptions. You are not your worst decision. You are not your greatest failure. You are a person who is still learning, adapting, and becoming. Another powerful shift occurs when you stop viewing mistakes as personal verdicts. A mistake simply reveals a gap between intention and execution. It provides information, not condemnation. The most confident individuals do not avoid failure because they believe they are exceptional. They recover more quickly because they refuse to confuse a disappointing result with their identity. As this new story takes shape, your behavior naturally changes. You become more willing to speak before every sentence feels perfect. You take opportunities that once felt intimidating. You stop waiting until fear disappears because you understand that courage grows through action, not certainty. Confidence is no longer something you hope to feel before you move forward. It becomes something you strengthen each time you act in alignment with your evolving identity. The story you tell yourself will never remain neutral. It is either expanding your future or quietly limiting it. Every day, through your thoughts, your choices, and your responses, you are editing the narrative that defines your life. Choose carefully. Build a story that reflects your values instead of your fears, your potential instead of your doubts, and your commitment to growth instead of your attachment to the past. When your inner narrative changes, your actions begin to change. And when your actions change consistently, the person you once imagined becoming gradually becomes the person you are. Chapter 4. Strengthen your body language. Long before you introduce yourself, explain your ideas, or reveal your achievements, your body has already begun speaking. Every movement, every pause, and every expression communicates something about how you see yourself. Whether you realize it or not, people respond not only to your words, but also to the quiet signals that surround them. Body language is often described as a tool for influencing others, but its first audience is you. The way you carry yourself shapes the way you think, just as the way you think shapes the way you carry yourself. Confidence is not simply expressed through posture, it is reinforced by it. When your body consistently reflects certainty, your mind gradually learns to operate from that same place. Consider how people behave when they doubt themselves. Their shoulders drift forward. Their eyes search the room for reassurance. They speak while avoiding direct eye contact, fidget with their hands, or rush through sentences as though trying to escape attention. None of these habits are intentional. They are physical expressions of an internal state. The body simply follows the story the mind has been telling. Fortunately, the relationship works in both directions. By becoming aware of these patterns, you can begin creating new ones. Confidence does not require dramatic gestures or carefully rehearsed performances. It begins with simple choices that communicate presence rather than anxiety. Start with your posture. Imagine a tree with deep roots beneath the ground. It does not struggle to appear strong. Its stability comes from its foundation. Stand with that same sense of balance. Let your shoulders relax instead of tightening. Keep your head level instead of lowered. Plant your feet with intention rather than shifting your weight endlessly from one side to the other. The goal is not to look powerful, but to feel grounded. Your pace also communicates more than you might expect. People who constantly rush often give the impression that they are reacting to life instead of directing it. Slowing down does not mean becoming passive, it means acting deliberately. Walk with purpose rather than urgency. Pause before responding instead of filling every silence. Allow your movements to reflect self-control rather than nervous energy. Eye contact deserves equal attention. Many people assume confident individuals maintain an intense stare, but genuine confidence feels different. It is steady without becoming aggressive. It signals attention rather than dominance. When you truly listen to another person instead of worrying about how you are being perceived, eye contact becomes natural because your focus shifts outward instead of inward. Your facial expressions tell a similar story. A relaxed face often communicates far more confidence than one trying too hard to appear impressive. You do not need to force a constant smile or exaggerate your emotions. Authentic expressions build trust because they reflect honesty instead of performance. Calmness is often mistaken for quiet confidence because both are rooted in emotional stability. Even the way you occupy space reveals something about your relationship with yourself. People who feel uncertain often make themselves physically smaller. They cross their arms, hunch over, or avoid taking up room, as though apologizing for being present. Confident people do not expand to intimidate others. They simply stop shrinking themselves. They sit comfortably, stand naturally, and allow themselves to exist without unnecessary self-consciousness. It is equally important to recognize what confident body language is not. It is not exaggerated dominance, forced gestures, or rehearsed poses designed to impress. Those behaviors often create the opposite effect because they are driven by insecurity disguised as certainty. Real confidence is remarkably quiet. It does not need to announce itself because it is not searching for approval. One useful habit is to observe your body during ordinary moments rather than only during important ones. Notice how you stand while waiting in line, how you enter a room, or how you react when someone challenges your opinion. These everyday situations reveal patterns that formal presentations never will. Small adjustments practiced consistently become natural over time, gradually replacing unconscious habits that once undermined your presence. As your body begins reflecting greater confidence, something deeper starts to change. You become less preoccupied with how you appear and more engaged with what you are doing. Your attention shifts from self-consciousness to contribution. Conversations become easier because you are no longer monitoring every movement. Decisions become clearer because you are no longer distracted by imagined judgment. Your body is not merely a reflection of your confidence, it is one of the ways you build it. Every calm breath, every deliberate step, every steady glance, and every grounded posture sends the same message to your mind. You belong here. Over time, those repeated signals become part of your identity. Confidence stops feeling like something you perform for others and becomes something you naturally embody, quietly earning respect before a single word is ever spoken. Chapter 5. Speak with calm authority. Words reveal far more than information. They reveal certainty, hesitation, conviction, and self-respect. Long before people evaluate the quality of your ideas, they often respond to the confidence with which those ideas are expressed. This is why communication is not merely about choosing the right words. It is about learning to speak from a place of inner clarity instead of emotional insecurity. Many people believe confident speakers are naturally gifted. They imagine that some individuals are simply born articulate while others are destined to remain quiet. In reality, the greatest difference rarely lies in vocabulary or intelligence. It lies in intention. Insecure communication is driven by a desire to be accepted. Confident communication is driven by a desire to be understood. That distinction changes everything. When approval becomes your goal, your speech begins to reflect uncertainty. You soften every opinion to avoid disagreement. You apologize before expressing an idea. You over-explain simple decisions because you hope additional words will prevent criticism. You rush through important points, fearing that taking too much time will inconvenience others. Ironically, the harder you try to avoid negative reactions, the less convincing you become. Speaking with calm authority begins by changing the purpose of communication. Instead of asking, "How can I make everyone agree with me?" ask, "How can I express this idea as clearly and honestly as possible?" One question seeks permission. The other accepts responsibility. The difference is subtle, but it transforms the energy behind every conversation. Clarity deserves more attention than cleverness. Many people hide uncertainty behind complicated language, believing complexity creates credibility. Yet the strongest communicators often choose the simplest words. They organize their thoughts before they speak, remove unnecessary explanations, and trust that a clear message carries more weight than an impressive performance. Simplicity is not a lack of intelligence. It is evidence that your thinking has become disciplined. Another powerful habit is becoming comfortable with silence. Silence makes many people uneasy because they assume every pause must be filled immediately. Yet thoughtful pauses communicate something valuable. They suggest that your words are chosen deliberately rather than produced out of nervousness. A brief moment of reflection often strengthens a message far more than speaking continuously without direction. The same principle applies when someone challenges your opinion. An immediate emotional reaction rarely demonstrates confidence. Composure does. You do not have to answer every criticism instantly. You do not have to defend every personal choice. Sometimes the strongest response is to listen carefully, consider what has been said, and answer only after your emotions have settled. Calmness is persuasive because it reflects self-control. Your tone matters as much as your message. Confidence does not demand a loud voice or dramatic delivery. It is steady rather than forceful. It remains respectful without becoming timid. A calm voice communicates that your ideas do not require aggression to be taken seriously. People often mistake volume for authority, but genuine authority comes from consistency, not intensity. There is also great strength in admitting what you do not know. Many people fear that uncertainty will weaken their credibility, so they pretend to have answers they do not possess. Confident individuals take a different approach. They recognize that honesty builds trust more effectively than false certainty. Saying, "I don't know, but I'm willing to learn," reflects security, not weakness. It demonstrates that your identity is not threatened by incomplete knowledge. As your confidence grows, another habit begins to disappear: the need to justify every decision. Explaining your reasoning can be valuable when it creates understanding, but constant justification often signals that you are asking others to approve choices you have already made. There is an important difference between offering an explanation and seeking permission. One is an act of communication. The other is an act of dependence. Speaking with calm authority also requires becoming a better listener. Many people enter conversations focused on preparing their next response instead of understanding what is actually being said. Genuine listening creates stronger communication because it allows you to respond to reality instead of assumptions. It also demonstrates quiet confidence. People who trust themselves do not feel compelled to dominate every discussion. They know that understanding often carries greater influence than speaking first. Ultimately, your voice becomes powerful not because it is flawless, but because it is authentic. When your words reflect your values, your tone reflects emotional balance, and your purpose is guided by truth rather than approval, communication changes. You stop performing for acceptance and start contributing with intention. Others may not always agree with you, but they will recognize something far more valuable. A person who speaks with clarity, listens with respect, and stands behind their words without needing constant validation. That is the quiet authority that earns lasting respect. Chapter 6. Set boundaries without guilt. The moment you begin valuing yourself differently, your relationships begin to change. Not because you become less caring, but because you stop believing that being a good person requires constant self-sacrifice. One of the clearest signs of growing confidence is the ability to protect your time, energy, and principles without carrying unnecessary guilt. Many people misunderstand boundaries. They imagine walls that push others away or rigid rules that create distance. In reality, healthy boundaries do the opposite. They create relationships built on honesty instead of resentment. They replace silent frustration with clear expectations. Most importantly, they remind you that respecting yourself is not an act of selfishness. It is the foundation of every healthy connection. Consider how often people say yes when every part of them wants to say no. They agree to extra work despite exhaustion. They accept invitations they have no desire to attend. They tolerate disrespect because confronting it feels uncomfortable. On the surface, these decisions appear generous. Beneath the surface, they often come from a fear of disappointing others. That fear quietly shapes an entire way of living. When your identity depends on being liked, every request feels like a test. Declining seems risky because you imagine losing approval. Over time, your schedule becomes crowded with obligations that were never truly your own. Your energy is spent maintaining expectations instead of pursuing priorities. Ironically, the more available you become to everyone else, the less available you are to yourself. Confidence changes this equation. Instead of asking, "Will they be upset if I say no?" you begin asking, "Is saying yes consistent with the life I want to build?" This shift is subtle but powerful. It moves your decisions away from emotional pressure and toward deliberate choice. You stop reacting to every demand and begin responding according to your values. Boundaries are not created through dramatic confrontations. More often, they are established through calm consistency. You do not need to defend every limit with lengthy explanations or emotional speeches. A simple, respectful response is often enough. The more comfortable you become with your decisions, the less you feel compelled to justify them. There is an important distinction between kindness and constant availability. Kindness is intentional. Constant availability is often automatic. One comes from generosity while the other frequently comes from the fear of rejection. Confident people still help others, but they do so because they choose to, not because they believe their worth depends on being indispensable. You will discover something interesting as you strengthen your boundaries. Some people will respect them immediately, others may resist. Not because your boundaries are unreasonable, but because they were accustomed to unlimited access to your time, attention, or emotional energy. Their discomfort does not necessarily mean you are doing something wrong. Sometimes it simply means the relationship is adjusting to a healthier balance. Learning to tolerate the temporary discomfort is part of becoming emotionally independent. You cannot control how every person responds to your decisions, but you can control whether those decisions reflect your principles. If every choice is designed to avoid disappointing someone, your own needs will eventually become invisible, even to yourself. Boundaries also protect something that is often overlooked: your attention. Every unnecessary commitment, every emotionally draining conversation, and every obligation accepted out of guilt consumes mental space. Attention is one of your most valuable resources because it shapes where your life moves. Whatever consistently receives your attention eventually influences your character, your habits, and your future. Protecting it is not a luxury, it is a responsibility. This does not mean becoming emotionally distant or refusing to compromise. Healthy relationships require flexibility, empathy, and mutual support. The difference is that compromise should come from strength rather than fear. You can care deeply about others without abandoning your own values. You can remain compassionate while refusing to accept disrespect. You can be generous without becoming exhausted. As your confidence grows, saying no begins to feel less like rejection and more like direction. Every thoughtful refusal creates room for something more meaningful. It protects your energy for the people, responsibilities, and goals that truly matter. Gradually, your life becomes less crowded by obligation and more guided by intention. Ultimately, boundaries are not about controlling other people. They are about taking responsibility for yourself. They communicate without anger or apology that your time has value, your principles deserve respect, and your well-being is worth protecting. The people who genuinely value you will not respect you less because you have boundaries. More often, they will trust you more because your actions reveal a person who understands that self-respect is the beginning of every lasting relationship, including the one you have with yourself. Chapter 7. Stop explaining every decision. There is a habit that quietly drains confidence without attracting much attention. It appears polite, responsible, and even thoughtful, yet beneath the surface it often reflects uncertainty. That habit is the constant need to explain yourself. Think about how often people justify ordinary decisions. They explain why they declined an invitation, why they changed careers, why they spent money on something meaningful, or why they chose a different path from everyone else. While there are moments when an explanation is appropriate, many explanations are not offered to create understanding. They are offered in the hope of receiving approval. This is where confidence begins to slip away. Every unnecessary explanation sends a subtle message to your own mind. I cannot trust my judgment unless someone else agrees with it. Over time, this pattern teaches you to seek permission before making choices that belong entirely to you. The habit becomes so automatic that you may no longer notice it. You start defending decisions that require no defense simply because silence feels uncomfortable. Confident people approach decisions differently. They recognize that every meaningful choice will satisfy some people and disappoint others. They accept this reality instead of trying to negotiate with it. Their goal is not universal agreement but personal integrity. They ask a different question: does this decision align with my values? Once that answer is clear, endless justification becomes unnecessary. Imagine a ship crossing the ocean. It does not change direction every time the wind shifts. The captain adjusts the sails but remains committed to the destination. Your principles should serve the same purpose. Feedback can help you navigate more wisely, but it should not determine where you are going. Without a clear destination, every opinion feels like a command instead of a suggestion. One reason people over-explain is that they confuse disagreement with rejection. Someone questions a decision, and immediately they begin building a detailed defense. Yet disagreement is not evidence that you are wrong. It simply means another person sees the situation through a different set of experiences, priorities, and values. Mature confidence allows room for different perspectives without feeling threatened by them. This does not mean becoming stubborn or refusing to listen. Wisdom welcomes thoughtful criticism because it recognizes that no one sees every angle. The difference lies in how you receive that criticism. Instead of reacting with anxiety, pause and ask yourself whether the feedback reveals useful information or merely reflects another person's preferences. Not every opinion deserves equal influence over your life. Another source of over-explaining is the fear of disappointing people. You may worry that setting a boundary, changing your plans, or pursuing an unconventional goal will upset someone. To reduce that discomfort, you add more reasons, more details, and more apologies, hoping your decision will become easier for them to accept. Ironically, this often weakens your message. The more uncertain you sound, the more people feel invited to negotiate choices that were never meant to be negotiated. Simple communication carries quiet strength. A respectful response delivered with clarity often creates more confidence than a long justification filled with hesitation. You do not need elaborate arguments to support decisions that are consistent with your values. When your reasoning is clear to you, it does not have to satisfy every observer. There is another benefit to speaking more simply. It creates space for genuine listening. When you are no longer preoccupied with defending yourself, you become more curious about others. Conversations stop feeling like debates that must be won and begin feeling like opportunities to understand. Confidence has no interest in proving superiority. It seeks clarity, not victory. As you practice trusting your own judgment, you will notice an important change. Decision-making becomes less exhausting. Instead of replaying conversations in your mind or wondering whether everyone approves of your choices, you evaluate yourself by a higher standard. Were you honest? Were you thoughtful? Did your actions reflect your principles? These questions matter far more than whether every person agreed with the outcome. Freedom begins the moment you realize that your life cannot be directed by a committee of opinions. Advice can be valuable, encouragement can be meaningful, and constructive criticism can help you grow. But none of these should replace your responsibility to think, choose, and act for yourself. From this point forward, let your decisions speak before your explanations do. Allow your consistency to build trust more effectively than your arguments ever could. The people who respect you most will rarely be those who demanded endless justification. They will be the ones who recognize the quiet confidence of a person who listens carefully, chooses deliberately, and moves forward without needing constant permission from the world. Chapter 8. Master Emotional Control. There is a common belief that confident people rarely experience fear, frustration, or self-doubt. In reality, they experience the same emotions as everyone else. The difference is not found in what they feel, but in what they do next. Confidence is not the absence of emotion. It is the ability to keep your emotions from becoming the author of your decisions. Every emotion carries a message, but not every message deserves immediate action. Imagine receiving an urgent email marked high priority. You would probably read it before deciding how to respond. You would not assume the subject line alone tells the whole story. Emotions work in much the same way. They demand attention, but they should not automatically receive authority. Anger, fear, embarrassment, and disappointment can all highlight something important, yet they rarely offer a complete picture of reality. Many people allow temporary emotions to make permanent decisions. A harsh comment convinces them to abandon a goal. A single rejection persuades them they are not capable. One difficult conversation ends a promising relationship or career opportunity. In those moments, emotion narrows perspective until the present feels larger than the future. Emotional control begins by creating space between feeling and action. That space may last only a few seconds, but it changes everything. Instead of reacting automatically, you learn to pause. You notice what you are feeling without immediately obeying it. This pause interrupts old patterns and gives your principles the opportunity to guide your response. Consider criticism. For someone whose confidence depends on approval, criticism often feels like a personal attack. The instinct is to defend, argue, withdraw, or prove the other person wrong. But criticism is not always an enemy. Sometimes it contains valuable information. Sometimes it reflects another person's misunderstanding. Sometimes it reveals more about the speaker than the listener. Emotional maturity allows you to examine criticism before deciding which category it belongs to. The same is true of praise. While compliments feel pleasant, they can become just as dangerous as criticism if your identity begins depending on them. When praise becomes your primary source of motivation, you gradually surrender control of your confidence to the opinions of others. You begin chasing recognition instead of pursuing excellence. Your emotional balance rises and falls with every external reaction. True confidence treats both praise and criticism with perspective. Neither becomes the final verdict on your worth. Both are considered, appreciated when useful, and then placed in their proper context. Another essential skill is learning to distinguish discomfort from danger. Your mind often interprets unfamiliar situations as threats. Speaking in public, introducing yourself to new people, negotiating a salary, or expressing an unpopular opinion may all create anxiety. Yet most of these experiences are uncomfortable, not dangerous. When you repeatedly confuse the two, your world gradually becomes smaller because avoidance begins making decisions on your behalf. Confident individuals recognize this pattern. They expect discomfort whenever they grow beyond familiar limits. Instead of interpreting nervousness as a signal to stop, they treat it as evidence that they are expanding their capabilities. The emotion remains, but its meaning changes. One practical way to strengthen emotional control is to become more curious than reactive. Whenever a strong emotion appears, ask yourself simple questions. What exactly triggered this feeling? Is my interpretation based on facts or assumptions? Will this matter 1 month from now? These questions shift your attention from impulse to understanding. The emotion loses some of its intensity because you are observing it rather than becoming consumed by it. Patience also plays a vital role. Many emotional mistakes occur because people demand immediate certainty. They want instant answers, instant relief, and instant resolution. Life rarely works that way. Some situations require time before clarity appears. Learning to tolerate uncertainty without forcing premature decisions is one of the quiet strengths of emotionally resilient people. As you develop this discipline, you begin noticing a profound change. Challenges that once overwhelmed you become manageable. Difficult conversations become opportunities instead of threats. Setbacks become temporary events instead of permanent identities. Your confidence no longer depends on having perfect circumstances because it is rooted in your ability to respond wisely regardless of the circumstances. Mastering emotional control does not mean becoming cold, detached, or indifferent. It means allowing your emotions to inform your life without allowing them to govern it. Feel deeply, but choose carefully. Listen to your emotions, but let your values make the final decision. In that balance, you discover a confidence that cannot be shaken by passing moods, unexpected criticism, or temporary setbacks. It is a quiet strength that grows stronger every time you choose thoughtful action over impulsive reaction, and it becomes one of the most valuable qualities you will ever develop. Chapter 9. Embrace discomfort to build courage. Most people spend a surprising amount of their lives trying to avoid discomfort. They postpone difficult conversations, delay ambitious goals, remain in familiar routines, and convince themselves that one day they will feel ready. It seems reasonable. After all, comfort feels safe. But there is one problem with this strategy. Almost everything that strengthens confidence exists on the other side of temporary discomfort. Confidence is often mistaken for certainty. We imagine that courageous people act because they feel completely prepared. Yet if you study people who consistently grow, lead, and create, you discover a different pattern. They rarely begin with certainty. They begin with commitment. They move before every doubt has disappeared because they understand that confidence is the result of action, not the requirement for it. Imagine standing at the edge of a cold lake early in the morning. You can spend hours thinking about the temperature, predicting how uncomfortable it will feel, or waiting for the perfect moment. None of that changes the water. The only way to discover that your body can adapt is to step in. Life presents countless moments like this. The longer you remain on the shore, the larger the challenge appears. The moment you begin, your attention shifts from fear to adjustment. Discomfort is often misunderstood because it disguises itself as danger. Your heart beats faster before an important presentation. Your hands become tense before introducing yourself to someone new. Your mind fills with questions before making a difficult decision. These reactions feel like warnings, but most of the time they are simply signs that you are entering unfamiliar territory. Growth and uncertainty frequently arrive together. The danger is not discomfort itself. The danger is building a life designed to avoid it. Every time you retreat from an opportunity because it feels intimidating, your mind learns a powerful lesson. It concludes that discomfort must be avoided. As this lesson repeats, your comfort zone slowly becomes your entire world. Opportunities shrink, confidence weakens, and ordinary challenges begin feeling extraordinary. Fortunately, the opposite lesson can also be learned. Each time you face a situation that makes you uncomfortable and discover that you can handle it, your mind updates its expectations. You become less afraid not because the challenge disappeared, but because you gained evidence that you are more capable than you previously believed. Courage is built through accumulated experiences, not inspiring thoughts. This is why small acts of bravery matter. Speaking honestly during a meeting, asking an important question, admitting a mistake, declining a request that conflicts with your priorities, or trying something you have never attempted before may seem insignificant. Yet each of these moments teaches your nervous system that temporary discomfort does not have to control your behavior. Over time, these seemingly ordinary decisions reshape your identity. There is another misconception worth challenging. Many people believe courage requires dramatic risks or extraordinary achievements. In reality, some of the bravest decisions are invisible to everyone else. Choosing consistency over excuses, remaining patient when progress feels slow, continuing after disappointment, accepting responsibility instead of blaming circumstances. These quiet acts of discipline build confidence because they strengthen your relationship with yourself. Think of courage as a muscle rather than a personality trait. A muscle grows through gradual resistance, not a single effort. If the challenge is too great, injury becomes more likely. If there is no challenge at all, growth never occurs. The same principle applies to personal development. Seek manageable discomfort regularly instead of waiting for life to force overwhelming change upon you. An important part of this process is redefining failure. When people fear failure, they often fear what it says about them rather than what it teaches them. Yet every meaningful skill requires periods of awkwardness, mistakes, and repeated adjustment. A person learning to play an instrument expects imperfect notes. An athlete expects unsuccessful attempts. Why should confidence develop any differently? When you stop treating mistakes as evidence of inadequacy, you become willing to experiment, adapt, and improve. Your focus shifts from protecting your image to expanding your abilities. That shift changes the way you approach every challenge. Instead of asking, "What if I fail?" you begin asking, "What might I become if I keep going?" The path toward lasting confidence is not paved with comfort. It is built through deliberate encounters with uncertainty, one decision at a time. Every challenge you willingly face becomes proof that fear does not have the final word. Every step beyond what feels familiar expands the boundaries of who you believe you can become. Eventually, courage stops feeling like a special occasion. It becomes a daily habit. You no longer wait for confidence before acting because you understand a deeper truth. Confidence follows action. It is earned through repeated choices to move forward despite uncertainty, to remain faithful to your values despite resistance, and to embrace temporary discomfort in pursuit of a stronger, freer, and more authentic version of yourself. Chapter 10. Invest in becoming more valuable. There comes a point in every journey of confidence when mindset alone is no longer enough. You may believe in yourself, speak with greater clarity, and stop seeking constant approval, but lasting confidence demands something more substantial. It asks you to become genuinely capable. The strongest confidence is not built on positive thinking alone. It is built on undeniable competence. Many people spend enormous energy trying to appear valuable. They carefully manage their image, seek recognition, and hope others will notice their potential. Yet image is fragile. It depends on perception, and perception changes. Real value is different. It exists whether people recognize it immediately or not, because it is rooted in what you can consistently contribute. Imagine two bridges crossing the same river. One is beautifully painted but poorly constructed. The other is simple in appearance, yet engineered with precision. At first glance, the attractive bridge may seem more impressive, but only one can reliably carry weight. Human character follows the same principle. Sooner or later, life tests every person. In those moments, appearance matters far less than substance. This is why confidence and competence must grow together. Confidence gives you the courage to step forward. Competence gives you the ability to remain there. Without confidence, your abilities stay hidden. Without competence, your confidence eventually loses credibility. The most respected people cultivate both. Becoming more valuable begins with accepting a simple truth. Your future is influenced by the skills you repeatedly improve, not the talents you naturally possess. Talent may open a door, but discipline determines how long you remain in the room. Every hour spent learning, practicing, and refining your craft becomes an investment that no one can take away. Ask yourself an important question. What problem can you solve better today than you could a year ago? Your answer reveals whether your value is expanding or remaining still. Growth is measured less by titles or income than by your increasing ability to create meaningful results for yourself and others. There is also a difference between being busy and becoming better. Many people confuse activity with progress. They fill every hour with tasks, yet rarely pause to improve the quality of the person performing those tasks. Growth requires intention. It means reading when entertainment feels easier, practicing when no one is watching, asking difficult questions instead of protecting your ego. It is a deliberate choice to invest in long-term capability rather than short-term comfort. Knowledge alone, however, is not enough. Information becomes valuable only when it changes behavior. Reading 100 books means little if your habits remain unchanged. The goal is not to collect ideas, but to apply them. Every lesson should become a decision, every decision a habit, and every habit part of your character. This is how learning transforms into value. As your competence grows, something interesting happens to your relationship with approval. You stop needing constant reassurance because your confidence begins resting on evidence rather than opinion. You know the effort you have invested. You know the standards you have maintained. Whether recognition arrives today or years from now becomes less important because your identity is no longer dependent on immediate applause. This perspective also changes the way you view competition. Instead of feeling threatened by someone else's success, you become inspired by what is possible. You understand that another person's achievement does not reduce your potential. Energy that was once wasted on comparison is redirected toward improvement. You compete less with strangers and more with yesterday's version of yourself. Remember that value extends beyond professional skills. Reliability, integrity, emotional maturity, patience, and the ability to keep your word are forms of value that cannot be measured by certificates or job titles. People trust those who consistently demonstrate character because character creates predictability. In a world filled with uncertainty, reliability becomes remarkably valuable. Eventually, you begin to notice a quiet shift. Opportunities appear more frequently, not because you are chasing them harder, but because you have become better prepared to recognize and seize them. Respect grows naturally because your actions consistently support your words. Confidence feels calmer because it is supported by genuine capability rather than wishful thinking. The most expensive person in any room is rarely the one demanding attention. It is the one who has invested patiently in becoming someone others can depend on. Continue strengthening your skills, refining your character, and expanding your capacity to contribute. When you focus on increasing your value instead of seeking validation, respect becomes a consequence rather than a goal. Your confidence no longer rests on what people say about you. It rests on the person you have chosen to become, one deliberate investment at a time. Chapter 11. Surround yourself with respect. Confidence is often described as an individual pursuit, but no one develops in complete isolation. The people around you shape your expectations, influence your habits, and quietly reinforce the standards you accept as normal. While your identity ultimately belongs to you, the environment you choose either strengthens that identity or slowly erodes it. Think about how easily attitudes spread. Spend enough time with people who constantly complain, and pessimism begins to sound reasonable. Remain surrounded by those who avoid responsibility, and excuses gradually become acceptable. The opposite is equally true. When you regularly interact with people who value honesty, discipline, curiosity, and accountability, those qualities begin to feel natural. Human beings adapt to the emotional climate around them, often without realizing it. This is why respect is more than something you receive. It is also something you choose to live among. Many people remain connected to relationships that consistently diminish them, not because those relationships are healthy, but because they are familiar. Familiarity can be comforting, even when it is harmful. You may tolerate constant criticism, subtle manipulation, or endless negativity simply because it has become part of your routine. Over time, repeated exposure shapes your self-image. You begin questioning your abilities, lowering your standards, or shrinking your ambitions to fit the expectations of those around you. The difficult truth is that not everyone who occupies space in your life deserves influence over it. Influence should be earned through wisdom, integrity, and genuine care, not through proximity or history alone. Someone may have known you for years and still offer advice rooted in fear rather than growth. Another person may have entered your life recently, yet inspire you to become stronger simply through the way they live. Confidence requires learning to distinguish between familiarity and positive influence. This does not mean surrounding yourself only with people who agree with you. In fact, constant agreement can become another form of comfort that limits growth. Respectful relationships allow room for disagreement without attacking character. They encourage honest conversations, constructive feedback, and mutual accountability. They challenge your thinking while still honoring your dignity. Pay attention to how you feel after spending time with certain people. Do you leave conversations feeling encouraged to grow or emotionally exhausted? Do they celebrate your progress or quietly compete with it? Do they challenge you to become more disciplined or tempt you to abandon the standards you have worked so hard to build? These questions reveal more about the quality of a relationship than years of shared history ever could. Equally important is the environment you create beyond personal relationships. The books you read, the conversations you seek, the ideas you consume, and the examples you admire all become silent teachers. Every influence either expands your perspective or narrows it. If your mind is constantly fed with comparison, outrage, and distraction, confidence struggles to take root. If it is nourished by thoughtful ideas, meaningful conversations, and people committed to growth, your thinking gradually becomes stronger. There is another responsibility that often goes unnoticed. As your confidence grows, you also become part of someone else's environment. Your words, habits, and attitudes influence the people around you. Ask yourself whether your presence creates encouragement or discouragement. Do you inspire others to trust themselves, or do you reinforce their doubts? Genuine confidence does not merely seek supportive relationships, it strives to become one. This perspective changes the purpose of connection. Relationships are no longer based on dependence, but on contribution. You stop asking, "Who will make me feel valuable?" and begin asking, "Who helps me become a better person, and how can I offer the same gift in return?" This shift replaces emotional neediness with mutual respect. Of course, there will always be people who misunderstand your growth. As you become more confident, set healthier boundaries, and pursue higher standards, some relationships may change. Not everyone will celebrate the person you are becoming because your growth may challenge the version of you they had grown comfortable with. Accept this without bitterness. Personal development sometimes requires leaving behind environments that no longer support the direction of your life. In the end, confidence is sustained not only by what you believe about yourself, but also by the atmosphere in which those beliefs are reinforced. Choose relationships that value honesty over flattery, accountability over excuses, and growth over comfort. Surround yourself with people who respect your principles, challenge your potential, and remind you through their actions that character matters more than appearance. When respect becomes the environment you live in, confidence no longer feels fragile. It becomes part of your daily experience, strengthened by every conversation, every shared value, and every relationship that encourages you to become the highest version of yourself. Chapter 12. Live by your own standards. There is a quiet moment in every person's life when they must answer a question no one else can answer for them. What does success actually mean to me? Until that question is answered honestly, it is easy to spend years pursuing goals that impress other people while leaving yourself strangely unfulfilled. Many lives are built on borrowed definitions. Society celebrates certain careers, lifestyles, possessions, and achievements, and without much reflection, we begin chasing the same things. We measure progress against people whose circumstances, priorities, and values are completely different from our own. The result is a constant feeling of being behind, even when we are moving in the right direction for our own lives. Comparison creates an endless race because there is no finish line. Someone will always earn more, own more, travel more, or receive greater recognition. If your confidence depends on outperforming everyone else, satisfaction will always remain just beyond your reach. The goal keeps moving because it was never truly yours to begin with. Living by your own standards starts with reclaiming the right to define a meaningful life for yourself. That definition cannot be copied from another person's story. It must emerge from your values, your responsibilities, and the kind of person you hope to become. Success is no longer measured only by visible outcomes, but by the consistency between your principles and your actions. Imagine an architect designing a home. Before construction begins, there must be a blueprint. Without one, every decision becomes reactive. Rooms are added without purpose, materials are chosen without direction, and the final structure lacks unity. Your personal standards serve as that blueprint. They determine what deserves your time, what deserves your attention, and what deserves your commitment. Without clear standards, every outside opinion becomes a possible instruction. You begin changing direction whenever someone offers advice, criticism, or praise. Your life starts reflecting the expectations of others rather than the convictions you have carefully developed. Confidence weakens because your identity has no stable foundation. Creating personal standards requires honesty. Ask yourself what qualities you want to be known for, even if no one applauds them. Would you rather be admired for appearances or trusted for integrity? Would you rather collect praise or build character? These questions reveal whether your life is being guided by external rewards or internal principles. Once your standards become clear, they begin simplifying your decisions. Opportunities are no longer judged only by how impressive they appear, but by whether they align with your values. Relationships are evaluated not by convenience, but by mutual respect. Success is measured not by occasional victories, but by daily consistency. This approach also transforms the meaning of discipline. Many people see discipline as restriction, yet genuine discipline creates freedom. Every time you honor your own standards, you strengthen trust in yourself. You no longer rely on changing moods or temporary motivation because your actions are guided by commitments that remain steady, even when emotions fluctuate. There will be moments when living by your standards feels lonely. Choosing integrity may cost you popularity. Declining opportunities that conflict with your values may confuse others. Refusing to compromise your principles may invite criticism from people who prioritize convenience over character. These moments are not signs that your standards are wrong. They are often evidence that your convictions are becoming stronger than your desire for approval. It is equally important to remember that standards should inspire growth, not perfection. Setting high expectations for yourself does not mean demanding flawless performance. You will still make mistakes, experience setbacks, and occasionally fall short of your own ideals. The difference is that your standards provide direction, not condemnation. They remind you where you are going, even when you temporarily lose your footing. As you continue living according to your own principles, something remarkable begins to happen. Decisions become less exhausting because you spend less time seeking permission. Your confidence becomes steadier because it is no longer dependent on comparison. You experience a deeper sense of peace because your actions reflect your beliefs rather than your fears. Ultimately, the most respected people are rarely those who adapt their values to match every changing trend or opinion. They are the individuals whose character remains consistent regardless of the circumstances around them. They know what they stand for, they act accordingly, and they accept that not everyone will understand their choices. Your standards become the quiet contract you make with yourself. They define the person you choose to be when no one is watching and the principles you refuse to abandon when life becomes difficult. Build those standards carefully, honor them consistently, and allow them to shape every decision you make. When your life is guided by values instead of validation, confidence is no longer something you occasionally feel. It becomes the steady rhythm of the way you live every single day. Chapter 13. Become impossible to manipulate. The more your confidence depends on other people, the easier it becomes for other people to control you. This truth is rarely spoken openly because manipulation is often subtle. It does not always appear as threats or obvious deception. More often, it arrives disguised as praise, guilt, fear, obligation, or the promise of acceptance. It quietly persuades you to act against your own judgment while convincing you that the decision was entirely your own. The strongest defense against manipulation is not suspicion. It is self-respect. People who know their values, trust their judgment, and accept responsibility for their choices are difficult to control because their decisions are guided from within. Those who constantly seek approval, however, unknowingly hand over the steering wheel of their lives. If someone else can determine how you feel about yourself, they can often influence what you are willing to do. Manipulation usually begins by identifying an emotional weakness. It may exploit your fear of rejection, your desire to be liked, your reluctance to disappoint others, or your habit of placing everyone else's comfort ahead of your own. These vulnerabilities are deeply human, but when they remain unexamined, they become doors through which unhealthy influence quietly enters. Consider how often guilt is used as a tool. Someone says, "If you really cared, you would do this," or, "After everything I've done for you, you owe me." Statements like these shift the conversation away from mutual respect and toward emotional pressure. Instead of inviting a thoughtful decision, they attempt to manufacture one. Genuine care never requires abandoning your integrity. Praise can also become a form of control when it is offered conditionally. If compliments appear only when you meet someone else's expectations and disappear the moment you act independently, they are no longer expressions of appreciation. They become rewards designed to shape your behavior. Confidence allows you to appreciate praise without becoming dependent on it. Another common tactic is creating urgency. You are told to decide immediately, to ignore your instincts, or to act before you have time to think. Pressure narrows perspective. It encourages emotional reactions instead of deliberate judgment. One of the quiet strengths of confident people is their willingness to pause. They understand that most important decisions become clearer with reflection, not haste. Learning to pause is a powerful habit. Whenever you feel emotionally pushed toward a decision, ask yourself a few simple questions. Am I choosing this because it aligns with my values, or because I am afraid of someone else's reaction? Would I make the same decision if guilt, praise, or pressure were removed? These questions restore ownership of your thinking and weaken the influence of manipulation. It is equally important to recognize that manipulation is not limited to other people. Sometimes your own fears become the loudest voice, influencing your decisions. The fear of failure may convince you to settle for less than you are capable of achieving. The fear of criticism may persuade you to remain silent when your ideas deserve to be heard. The fear of being misunderstood may stop you from living authentically. Confidence requires confronting these internal pressures with the same honesty you apply to external ones. As your self-respect grows, your relationships naturally begin to change. You become more comfortable saying no without hostility. You stop apologizing for decisions that honor your principles. You listen carefully to advice, but you no longer confuse someone else's opinion with your own responsibility. This balance allows you to remain open-minded without becoming easily influenced. There will always be people who prefer the older version of you, the version that rarely disagreed, always explained itself, and consistently placed other people's expectations above personal convictions. Your growth may unsettle them because your confidence removes forms of control they once relied upon. Accept this as part of the journey rather than a reason to retreat. Healthy relationships adapt to stronger boundaries. Unhealthy ones often resist them. Freedom is not the absence of influence. Every person is shaped by family, culture, mentors, and experience. True freedom is the ability to examine those influences consciously instead of following them automatically. It is the courage to ask whether a belief, habit, or expectation genuinely belongs to you before allowing it to shape your future. When you stop measuring your worth through approval, manipulation begins losing its power. Guilt no longer dictates your choices. Flattery no longer blinds your judgment. Pressure no longer overrides your principles. Your decisions become slower, wiser, and more intentional because they are guided by values instead of emotional impulses. Ultimately, becoming impossible to manipulate is not about building emotional walls or distrusting everyone around you. It is about building such a strong relationship with your own character that no external force can easily persuade you to betray it. The person who cannot be bought by praise, shaken by criticism, or driven by fear possesses a quiet kind of freedom. And that freedom is one of the clearest expressions of genuine confidence. Chapter 14. Command respect without demanding it. As this journey comes to its final chapter, it becomes clear that confidence was never the true destination. Confidence is the vehicle. The destination is a life directed by self-respect instead of self-doubt, by conviction instead of approval, and by purpose instead of fear. Everything you have explored, from releasing the need for validation to building emotional discipline, has been preparing you for one simple truth. Respect cannot be forced, requested, or negotiated. It is earned through the consistent way you choose to live. Many people spend years trying to control how others perceive them. They carefully manage every conversation, worry about every impression, and constantly adjust themselves to fit different expectations. It is an exhausting way to live because it places your identity in the hands of people whose opinions are always changing. The more energy you spend managing your image, the less energy you have available to strengthen your character. Character has a remarkable quality that reputation does not. Reputation depends on observation. Character depends on choice. You cannot control every story people tell about you, but you can control the standards you live by. You cannot prevent misunderstanding, criticism, or unfair judgment, but you can decide whether those experiences alter your principles. This realization is deeply liberating because it shifts your attention toward the one place where lasting confidence can actually grow: your own actions. Think of a mountain standing through changing seasons. Storms arrive, snow falls, winds reshape the landscape, yet the mountain remains rooted. It does not argue with the weather or seek approval from the sky. Its strength comes from its foundation. Your confidence should be built the same way. Circumstances will change, opinions will change, even your own emotions will change. But when your values remain steady, your identity remains stable. This does not mean becoming emotionally distant or refusing to care about others. Respecting yourself should never require disrespecting someone else. In fact, genuine confidence often makes a person more patient, more compassionate, and more willing to listen. When you no longer feel the need to defend your worth, conversations become less about proving yourself and more about understanding others. Strength and kindness are not opposites, they are partners. As you continue through life, there will be moments when your confidence is tested. A setback may shake your plans. Criticism may challenge your decisions. Unexpected failure may invite old doubts to return. Do not mistake these moments for signs that you have lost your progress. Confidence is not measured by the absence of difficult emotions. It is measured by your willingness to return to your principles despite them. Remember the lessons you have built along the way. You learned that approval is optional, but integrity is essential. You discovered that your inner dialogue shapes your identity long before the outside world responds to it. You strengthened your presence through deliberate action, your communication through clarity, and your relationships through healthy boundaries. You chose courage over comfort, growth over comparison, and values over convenience. None of these changes happened overnight. They were built one decision at a time. Perhaps the greatest reward of this transformation is not that people begin respecting you more, although many will. The greater reward is that you begin trusting yourself more. You stop second-guessing every decision. You stop searching for constant reassurance. You recognize that your life no longer needs to be measured against someone else's expectations because it is being guided by standards you have consciously chosen. Ironically, this is often the moment when respect naturally appears. People are drawn to those who know where they stand without needing to dominate a room. They trust individuals whose actions remain consistent whether anyone is watching or not. They remember those who remain calm during uncertainty, speak honestly without arrogance, and treat themselves and others with equal dignity. Respect is attracted to consistency because consistency reveals character. As you leave this audiobook behind, resist the temptation to treat these chapters as ideas that were pleasant to hear but unnecessary to practice. Knowledge changes very little until it becomes behavior. Let every conversation become an opportunity to listen with confidence. Let every challenge become a chance to strengthen your resilience. Let every difficult decision remind you that your values matter more than immediate approval. One day, someone may ask what changed in you. They may notice that you speak more clearly, hesitate less, or seem calmer under pressure. The real answer will be invisible. You stopped trying to convince the world that you were valuable, and instead devoted yourself to becoming a person whose character made that question unnecessary. That is the lasting meaning of confidence. It is not a performance for an audience. It is a commitment to yourself. Live by that commitment every day, and respect will never again be something you chase. It will become a quiet reflection of the life you have intentionally built. Conclusion. If there is one idea worth carrying beyond this audiobook, it is this. Confidence is not something you discover. It is something you practice. It is not a reward waiting at the end of success, nor is it a quality reserved for a fortunate few. It is built quietly through the decisions you make when no one is watching, through the promises you keep to yourself, and through the standards you refuse to compromise, even when compromise would be easier. Throughout this journey, you have explored a different way of thinking about confidence. You have seen that approval is unpredictable, but character is a choice. You have learned that self-respect grows when your actions consistently reflect your values rather than your fears. You have recognized that genuine influence is not created by impressing people, but by becoming someone whose integrity remains steady in every circumstance. There will still be moments when doubt returns. There will be days when criticism feels personal, uncertainty clouds your judgment, or old habits tempt you to seek reassurance from the outside world. Do not see those moments as failures. See them as invitations to return to the foundation you have built. Confidence is not measured by never struggling. It is measured by how often you choose principles over impulses and purpose over temporary comfort. Remember that the world will always offer countless ways to measure your worth. It will encourage comparison, reward appearances, and tempt you to chase validation that never truly satisfies. You do not have to accept those measurements. You have the freedom to define success by the quality of your character, the consistency of your actions, and the honesty with which you live your life. As you move forward, continue investing in yourself. Learn new skills, strengthen your discipline, protect your boundaries. Choose relationships that encourage growth and become that kind of person for others. Let your confidence be supported by competence, guided by integrity, and balanced with humility. These qualities do not seek attention, yet they naturally earn trust and lasting respect. One day, you may look back and realize the greatest transformation was not that people treated you differently. It was that you began treating yourself differently. You stopped asking whether you were enough and started asking whether you were living according to the person you wanted to become. That single shift changes every decision that follows. Walk into the next chapter of your life knowing that your value is not waiting for someone else to recognize it. It grows every time you choose courage over comfort, truth over approval, and responsibility over excuses. Live with that mindset consistently, and confidence will no longer feel like a destination you are chasing. It will become the quiet strength that shapes your choices, your relationships, and your future. When you stop searching for permission to matter and start living with conviction, respect ceases to be something you pursue. It becomes the natural consequence of the life you have chosen to build.